Good morning, Birmingham Unitarian Church.
Good morning.
Welcome to all, whether you're visiting us for the first time or have been here many times before. Whether you're joining us here in the sanctuary or remotely via Zoom or watching this recording later, it's good to connect with you. Today, children will be with us in the sanctuary to hear a story before heading to their activities of the morning. The family room, just to the left at the back of the sanctuary, with audio of the service piped in, is open for parents and children. And care is also available on the nursery on the lower level for infants and children through age 5. By greeting our virtual neighbors, we build a bridge between online and in-person participants. First, we'll project on our screen the image of folks who are with us on Zoom. And if you're comfortable doing so, please turn on your cameras and give us a wave. Now, those of us who are gathered here in the sanctuary are invited to turn and face the camera in the back and give the folks on Zoom a wave. If you're here with us in person today, we invite you to join us after the service for coffee and conversation in Hodis Hall, which is located to the left after you exit the sanctuary. Our newcomer table is a place where visitors and newcomers can meet and chat with members of the congregation and with each other. All are encouraged to drop by, just look for the colorful sign. And if you're with us on Zoom today, we invite you to stay on the call for a virtual coffee hour after service ends. Wherever, however, and whenever we connect with Birmingham Unitarian Church, we are building this beloved community.
We light our chalice flame with the words of Charles Lytle. Rejoice in love we know and share, in love and beauty everywhere. Rejoice in truth that makes us free, and in the good that yet shall be.
I invite you to rise in body or spirit and join in singing hymn number 170 from the Gray Hymnal, We Are a Gentle, Angry People. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. And we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a justice-seeking people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a justice-seeking people, and we are singing, singing for our lives.
The journey to end racism is ongoing, and each of us has a role to play. Join us to explore our collective action and how personal commitment can drive meaningful change. Living the Pledge is a BUC-sponsored course about racial justice. Our LTP alumni will share their experiences confronting systemic racism this morning and reflect on the personal pledges they've made to learn and advance racial justice. Their stories offer insight, inspiration, and a challenge to all of us. One insight, one voice, one pledge at a time.
Today, we're going to hear about the history of we. What does the beginning look like? In this fertile African cradle, the birthplace of civilization is found. Here, we dreamed and we spoke. We shared and we healed. We sang and danced and built and explored. We lived. Let us travel back to the start, so far back that all of our roots begin to tell the same story, the origin story of humankind, the history of we. We walked this earth not 1,000 years ago, but 200 times more than that. We wove nouns and verbs into a web of language that connected us. With minds as intelligent as those born today, we sculpted words to make stories and shared stories that made our community. A brilliant blueprint for all human beings to come. We were artists, inspired by endless waves of field and sea. We questioned, what could this blank canvas possibly become? How many tales could it hold? With boundless vision, we painted wonder. We saw beauty not just around us, but within us, bringing creative expression to our surroundings and ourselves. We crafted new styles. Drums and heartbeats in sync, we played alongside the chorus of nature's radiant choir. We orchestrated hymns and melody, music that moved us. And we never stopped moving to the rhythm. We allowed our bodies to be swept away by the pulsating vibrations of Earth's very soul, its heartbeat and our own intertwined. Humanity soared. We had begun to dance. Nature presented us with many gifts, but when obstacles arose, we became inventors to ensure our survival. At the mercy of harsh winds and rain, we needed shelter. Over time, house became home, our place of safety. We were architects. We learned the cycles of the seasons, the nourishing rains and steady warmth of the sun. We called and the earth responded. With patience and reverence, we cultivated bountiful harvests. We grew. When our people cried out in pain, we examined every plant and documented every medicinal property. We healed. Communicating with the skies, we asked questions about our humble place in a grand galaxy of stars. We saw worlds beyond our own. We began to connect the dots. The rough waters felt impossible to cross, but we were curious about what lay beyond our shores. We began to wonder, perhaps the Nile perch are not the only ones who can river fly. Can we not try? We soon became one with the rivers and the oceans, and from the gleaming golden coast, we set sail. The seas were a pathway to dreams beyond. We were skilled, graceful, fearless, and fast as the flying wind. We explored. In our quest for the unknown, we found new horizons. And on those new shores, we built new lives, new languages, new inventions, new homes. Courageous journeys led to new firsts in our one and only ever flourishing human race. From the motherland into every corner of Mother Earth, one group became many, became extended cousins, developing an array of diverse complexions and forms of prayer, became the first global population, became we. At this time, we'll have our children and youth join us at the back of the sanctuary as we head off to class.
The mission of Birmingham Unitarian Church is to be a free and welcoming religious community that encourages lives of integrity, learning, service, and joy. One way we live out this mission is by giving half of our weekly offering to a nonprofit organization that shares our values and addresses needs in the community. The recipient of our plate sharing today is Heal Palestine. Heal Palestine is a non-political, nonprofit organization founded in January of 2024. In response to the unimaginable devastation in Gaza, where thousands of lives were lost in a short period, impacting generations for decades to come. They provide critical care and resources while centering grassroots leadership and community-led recovery. Their work is rooted in dignity, resilience, and the belief that every child deserves a chance to heal and thrive. They envision a Palestine where all of its children have access to quality health care and education, basic humanitarian needs, and the tools and opportunities to be leaders and catalysts for positive change in their independent country. Their work includes evacuating young victims of violence for specialized treatment in the United States. Recently, they brought 4 children to Detroit, where they are receiving prosthetic limbs and care. Our ushers will now come to receive this morning's offering, which is given in a spirit of generosity and gratitude. With gratitude, we dedicate this offering to the good work of our congregation and Heal Palestine. This morning, we begin our meditation and prayers first with Heal Palestine, because Keith informed me this morning that a great impact from the political structure is going to affect them remarkably, just this morning announced. So we enter this time with the words of Rumi. Through love, all that is bitter will be sweet. Through love, all that is copper will be gold. Through love, all dregs will become wine. Through love, all pain will turn to medicine. We hold each other in our hearts and minds with all our joys and all our sorrows. The joys and sorrows of this congregation that are shared with us this morning are these. We wish Larry Larson a very successful heart update this week. We also remember our friend Priscilla Hildren, now 95, who called to say she had a bad fall 2 weeks ago. I knew when I missed her 2 weeks something was wrong. Although she is recovering, she needs a walker for mobility. Her sons are here to help her. She says she is eager to return to church to be with her many friends. Brian Johnson requests your prayers for his admission to the University of Michigan Bone Marrow Transplant Unit for the procedure to begin on Thursday. Remember those experiencing losses and those of us facing health challenges. We pray in whatever way we pray for all those affected by war, by hatred, and by violence. We pray for peace. The cares of the world are many, and even when the cares of the world weigh on us, may we find joy in our connection with each other and in the pleasures that life holds. Let us take care of one another and ourselves in all the ways we can. Let us make this a safe and welcoming place for all. As we hold each other in our hearts and minds with all our joys and all our sorrows, and we remember in great joy the wedding last night of our Kircher family. Let's take a moment to be quiet together.
More than a century and a half before the American Revolution, a human hierarchy evolved on the contested soil of what would become the United States. It was a concept of birthright, the temptation of entitled expansion that would set in motion the world's first democracy, and with it, a ranking of human value and use. It would twist the minds of men as greed and self-reverence eclipsed human conscience to take land and human bodies that the conquering men had convinced themselves they had a right to. If they were to convert this wilderness and civilize it to their liking, they decided that they would need to conquer, enslave, or remove the people that were already on the land and transport those they deemed lesser beings to tame and work the land to extract the wealth that lay in the rich soil and the shorelines. Now, to justify their plans, they took pre-existing notions of their own centrality. Now, this was reinforced by their reinterpretation of the Bible, and they created a hierarchy of who could do what, who could own what, who was on top, who was in the middle, and who was on the bottom. And there emerged a ladder of humanity, global in nature, as the upper rung people would descend from Europe with rungs inside that designation with English Protestants at the very top. Because their guns and resources would ultimately prevail in the bloody fight over North America. Now, everybody else would rank in descending order on the basis of their proximity to those who were deemed most superior. Now, the ranking would continue downward until one arrives at the very bottom. African Americans, transported to build the new world and to serve the victors for all their days, one generation after another, and it has continued for 12 generations. And there developed a caste system based upon what people look like, and an internalized, unspoken, unnamed, unacknowledged by everyday citizens as they go about their lives adhering to it and acting upon it subconsciously, even today. And just as the studs and the joists and the beams that form the infrastructure of a building are not visible to those who live in it, so it is with caste. Its very invisibility is what gives it power and longevity. And though it may move in and out of consciousness, and though it may flare and reassert itself in times of upheaval and recede in times of calm, it is an ever-present through line in our today's operation. This is a reading from the book Caste, The Origins of Our Discontent by Isabel Wilkerson.
This morning, we have the privilege of hearing the Living the Pledge alumni, a few of them. Some of them also around on this platform and in this congregation. And I am very excited to share their story and them to share their story with you.
Good morning. I'm Sarah Sullivan, and I was blessed to be part of the Living the Pledge course in 2023. Martin Luther King said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." For much of my life, I could agree. It felt like we were at least slowly moving in a positive direction in our country. But in 2025, I began to grow weary. It seemed as if decades of progress were being reversed in just a few months, and I began to lose hope. But Brian Stevenson reminds us that hopelessness is the enemy of justice. Hopelessness can immobilize movements, making it harder to challenge injustice. We can't give in to despair. In March, some friends and I traveled to Selma, Alabama. That experience taught me that hope is a verb. It's only real when we take action. Today, I'll share some of what inspired me on that trip. We went to Selma for the 60th anniversary of the Voting Rights March. The march was inspired by Jimmy Lee Jackson, an Army veteran and father of a young daughter, who was working in Alabama to register Black Americans to vote. He was protecting other activists from police beatings when the police shot him. His death led the civil rights leaders to call for a march from Selma to Montgomery, 54 miles, to the capital of Alabama. They chose Selma to start the march, not because it was safe, but because they knew the governor, the mayor, and the police chief were so mean and so racist that they would likely treat the protesters brutally. They were willing to suffer courageously, knowing that their actions could draw national attention and hopefully finally begin to shift public opinion. Brutal they were. Police on horseback attacked protesters with clubs, fracturing John Lewis's skull and hospitalizing 17 others. The horrific treatment of the protesters so moved many Americans that they traveled from across the country to support the cause, growing it from a small march of 600 to a demonstration of 25,000 people. I did not realize until I was there how involved Unitarians were in Selma. James Reeb and 2 other Unitarian pastors joined the protest. They were attacked, and James Reeb later died from his injuries. He was eulogized by Dr. Martin Luther King and referenced by President Johnson when sharing a draft of the Voting Rights Act. Another Unitarian, Viola Liozzo, a mother of 5 from Detroit, was driving Black activists to Montgomery when a car full of Ku Klux Klan members started following her. She sang freedom songs in response, but they pulled up next to her, shot, and killed her. Especially following the deaths of white Americans, public pressure to support the protesters also grew, and the voting rights bill finally passed. Standing on that same bridge 60 years later, while voting rights are again being attacked, I was humbled. I asked myself, what comforts and privileges am I willing to risk for justice today? That's an important question, especially those of us who are white-bodied. We have a responsibility to stand alongside those who have carried the burden of this fight for generations. Too much of the fighting, the suffering, and the sacrifice has been shouldered and led by the backs of Black Americans. The night before the 60th anniversary march in Selma, I attended a mass meeting at Tabernacle Baptist Church where Dr. Willie Drain Francois delivered a powerful sermon. He spoke about the nature of progress, saying it's not linear, but cyclical. He shared that in American history, whenever there has been Black progress, there has been severe white backlash. He pointed to many moments in history, from 246 years of slavery to the hopeful progress of Reconstruction, followed by the backlash of the rise of the Ku Klux Klan and Jim and Jane Crow, to the optimistic period of the Civil Rights Movement, followed by the backlash, including the assassination of leaders like Martin Luther King, the election of President Barack Obama, followed by the backlash of the election of a white supremacist president. This cycle of progress and backlash is painful, but we can't let it deter us. We must remember that the power of love and justice is greater than any backlash if we all rise to do our part. The pastor closed his sermon with a powerful story about Howard Thurman's grandmother, who was born into slavery and then moved to segregated Daytona Beach. She chose to buy a house right on the edge of the color line. Her white neighbor, though, did not appreciate her gall to buy this home right next to her. Every day, the white woman would throw her chicken mess over the fence into her neighbor's yard. Then one day, when the white neighbor fell ill and Howard Thurman's grandma brought her some flowers and soup to help her feel better, the neighbor invited her in for the first time and asked, "Where did you get these beautiful roses and delicious vegetable soup?" Howard Thurman's grandma replied that every day when her neighbor tossed her chicken mess over the fence, she went outside and turned that chicken mess into the soil, and she made compost to nurture her roses and her vegetable garden. If she could transform that evil into something beautiful, we can do the same with the challenges we face today. We've seen this evil before, and we've defeated it before. We can do it again. Lucille Clifton writes in her poem, "Won't you come celebrate with me? Every day, something has tried to kill me and failed." The pastor in Selma reminded us that slavery failed, Jim and Jane Crow failed. Yes, racism and white supremacy still have some energy in our society, but if we keep fighting, they will fail too. We need to be more courageous, more committed. The pastor reminded us that we do not have the right to remain silent. We cannot stay comfortable or let despair hold us back. We must act. As John Lewis said, we must make good trouble, necessary trouble. The path forward is made each day by all of us together, with every word we speak or hold silent, with every dollar we spend or share, with every protest we attend or cause we support. We can encourage each other, find solidarity, and create change together. We can contribute, catching one another and lifting each other up when we fall into a moment of despair. Chris and I chose BUC and a Unitarian church for our family because we wanted to bolster our spirits and find a community that supports social and racial justice. We're glad to be here and a part of this community, and we look forward to contributing with you all.
Good morning. My name is Sarah Redmond. I've been a member of this congregation for many, many years, and I'm thrilled to be here sharing just a few glimpses of what my work on behalf of racial justice has been about. Small acts, big impact. At BUC, we live the pledge to end racism. We learn, yes, but learning alone is not enough. Change happens when we act. For years, I volunteered as a tester for the Fair Housing Center. When someone reported housing discrimination, I would step in, pretending to be a renter, to help gather proof. My experience? I was never turned away, never treated poorly, but others, people of color, were. And my small part helped bring those cases to light. Another time, on our Sunday drives to church, I saw it again and again. Black drivers pulled over by the police, not once, not twice, but 3 times in just a short while. I decided enough. So I wrote to the Michigan State Police, the Auburn Hills Police, and copied Joanne Watson of the NAACP with my observations. I got a call from the police chief in Auburn Hills demanding that I come and bring that Joanne Watson with me. Needless to say, I did not accept that invitation. So the state police handled it a little differently. They sent a young black patrolman to my house with the party line. No, we do not discriminate. We do not know who the color of the person in that car when we pull them over. So I said, yes, I understand. I'm just giving you my observation. So, but off the record, that young black man, after we had a lovely conversation, said, "Thank you for writing that letter." Later, after Dan passed, I joined a Black Authors Book Club in South Carolina. When I asked whether or not I should be part of the group, I was told, "We won't be uncomfortable, but you might." And yes, sometimes I was, but that discomfort, nothing compared to the injustice that the others lived on a day-to-day basis. So I say to you, look around. Find places where you can use your privilege, your friendship, your voice. And as Congressman John Lewis said, I think we're all going to quote him, create good trouble, because small acts, everyday acts, truly do make a difference.
Sorry, quick switching of binders here. In April 2024, Mary Gowell-Ensroth and I, Keith Ensroth, took an 18-day vacation focused on Black history in the South. There is certainly Black history in Detroit. However, the Detroit Black experience was different than in the South. We wanted to deepen our understanding of Black history, American history, by focusing on the South. While there were many places and experiences to choose from, this is where we went. In Memphis, we went to the National Civil Rights Museum in the Lorraine Hotel. Besides being the location of where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was killed, there is an extensive addition that more than doubles the size of the original hotel. The Cotton Museum at the Memphis Cotton Exchange provides the economic basis of the role of cotton in the South, albeit with almost no acknowledgement of enslaved labor. We also experienced the Memphis Rock and Soul Museum. About an hour's drive from New Orleans is the Whitney Plantation. It is the only plantation in Louisiana that is focused on the role of enslaved people. We also learned about the Black history of New Orleans, walking with a guide from All About Dat Tours. On our way from New Orleans to Montgomery, we stopped in Mobile, Alabama, to visit the Africatown Heritage House. In 1860, 52 years after the transatlantic slave trade legally ended, the last illegal transportation of enslaved people from Africa took place as a result of a $1,000 bet that a Mobile Bay shipmaker made that he could take one of his ships to Africa and bring more than 100 people back and sell them as slaves. The descendants of these enslaved people still live in what is now a neighborhood of Mobile. In Montgomery, the capital of Alabama, the Equal Justice Initiative has built and maintained 3 significantly transformative experiences: the Legacy Museum, the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, and the Freedom Monument Sculpture Park. We left Montgomery on Monday, April 22nd, with all the state public offices closed for Confederate Memorial Day. It was a stark reminder of what William Faulkner said: the past is never dead, it isn't even past. Our final stop was Atlanta. The National Park Service manages the MLK National Historic Park that includes a museum focused on the life of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement. The Associated Preservation District includes Martin Luther King's birthplace, as well as the historic Ebenezer Baptist Church, in which he grew up and was eventually the pastor. Across the street is today's significantly larger Ebenezer Baptist Church. It is the church for which United States Senator Raphael Warnock has been pastor since 2005. All of these sites were worth our time. We'll talk in more depth about a few of them. So Mary, what was your most memorable experience for you on this trip?
In Montgomery, Alabama, we were privileged to visit what are referred to as the legacy sites, which encompass the Legacy Museum, the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, and Freedom Monument Sculpture Park. For me, the most memorable experience of our Black History in the South tour were two of these sites. Initially, you might consider the Legacy Museum to be another traditional museum, but it is not. Based on deep scholarship and research, community engagement in the museum creation process, and an amazing multi-sensory immersive experience, the museum draws a clear line from 250 years of enslavement to the subsequent terrorism immediately after the Civil War, to de jure and de facto segregation through the subsequent 100 years, to today's mass incarceration of African Americans. While the last of these stages may surprise some people, the fact remains that the one area that has not been addressed by legislation is discrimination in the criminal justice system. Two memories remain vivid even a year later. One is from the first room we walk into beginning the tour of the museum. It is a dark room in which a screen that fills a large wall shows powerful ocean waves crashing against the shore, accompanied by the roar of the sea. We stand there and imagine the inhumanity of the transatlantic slave trade as if we were on a slave ship. The second is a display of 800 jars lining two sides of a wall near the end of the museum tour. Each jar contains soil collected from a site where a racial lynching took place. A label on each jar lists the name of the victim, the date of the lynching, and the county in which it occurred. It is part of the Community Remembrance Project, where members of the communities across the country research victims of lynchings and participate in a soil collection ceremony at the site of these lynchings. Another part of the legacy site is the National Memorial for Peace and Justice. The central part of the memorial is an open-air structure displaying more than 800 weathered steel columns suspended from the roof. Each of these 6-foot-tall columns represents a U.S. county where a documented racial terror lynching took place between 1877 and 1950, for a total of 4,000 lynchings. Each column is engraved with the names of a county and the names of the known victims of the lynchings that occurred there. As the trail continues outside the main part of the monument, a water wall commemorates the 2,000 or more additional lynchings that have never been recorded. As you walk through the memorial, individual stories record and personalize the brutalities. One plaque reads, "Mary Turner was lynched with her unborn child at Folsom Bridge at the Brooks-Lowndes County line in Georgia in 1918 for complaining about the recent lynching of her husband, Hayes Turner." At this memorial, another memory remains visually vivid. As we walk through, the columns, initially at eye level, gradually rise above our heads, envisioning an image of bodies hanging. The installation seems to deliberately induce feelings of claustrophobia. Keith, what are the most memorable experiences for you?
It was definitely exactly what you just described. But if I were to choose my next most memorable experience, it would be All About Dat tours. We were immersed in the breadth and depth of the history of New Orleans, as explained by Michaela Iverson, the owner. We started in Louis Armstrong Park, a portion of which is Congo Square, the place where enslaved Black people could have their limited day of freedom each Sunday. From here, Michaela drove us through the heart of the African-American Treme neighborhood to Bayou Road, where she introduced us to several Black-owned businesses. We particularly enjoyed buying a few books and talking with the owner of the Community Book Center, eating dinner at the Adesnola Ethiopian restaurant, and tasting the delicacies of the cupcake fairies. Michaela was true to what is described on her website, and I quote, "The tour we give is honest, No sugar-coated skipping over the unpleasant truth of slavery. We start at the beginning of the Africans' forced journey, their music, the healing drum circles of the enslaved at Congo Square, also known as the birthplace of jazz, the story of slavery and resistance, end quote. Contrary to the assertions of those who want to hide our past in this country, she does not preach at you to make you feel guilty. Rather, she describes what systemic white male supremacy has done to us as a nation and how it lives on today. She was very clear that the problem is not being a white male. The problem is with the system that was built on the exploitation of all African Americans, as well as the exploitation of all women. While she challenged us to share the message as one to rectify the inequality that exists today, she also called us to live our life's principles, to respect and care for one another, to change the world through our own interactions. Mary, what would be the next most memorable experience after the two we've already described?
On the Whitney Plantation website, a caption from the National Geographic reads, "The plantation every American should visit." Located about an hour's drive from New Orleans, Whitney Plantation is a former sugar, indigo, and rice plantation which began operating in 1752 and now functions as a nonprofit museum dedicated to telling the history of slavery from the perspective of the enslaved rather than the enslavers. Originally, the plantation was a 1,500-acre property. Currently, the museum occupies 200 acres and has preserved over a dozen historical structures. Besides being a plantation with preserved buildings, there are powerful monuments. One displays the names of over 107,000 people enslaved in Louisiana between 1719 and 1820. Almost all Christian first names, because it was the law in the French territory and later in the state of Louisiana that any enslaved person had to be baptized as a Catholic. Another honors the 2,200 children who died in slavery before they reached adulthood. A description of the installation reads in part, "Enslaved mothers suffered tremendously. Francoise, an enslaved laundress on this plantation, lost 5 children by the age of 23. 3 died within 1 month. Still another commemorates a slave revolt where enslaved people marched towards New Orleans but were killed and beheaded." While you can use a recorded audio tour of your visit, Keith and I signed up for a tour guided by an actual person. There is a deep emotional message that comes through in person when a tour like this is given by a descendant of the enslaved in this country. The emotions continue as you read the individual names of the enslaved people on the various monuments and look at the depictions of bronze head sculptures on pikes to show what happened to those who chose to protest their conditions in the slave revolt. Driving from the plantation, we both realized that the Whitney Plantation was not simply a footnote to the story of slavery, but rather a testimonial to the lives of individual human beings who endured horrific hardships and atrocities. And Keith, what would you choose to round out our most memorable experiences?
The Memphis Rock and Soul Museum was founded and continues in association with the Smithsonian. I had initially expected a museum like the Motown Museum in Detroit, only with a Memphis flavor, for example, Sun Records and Stax Records. But they started the story much further back, in the days of the sharecroppers, where both black and white workers sang while doing the backbreaking work of tending the crops, particularly cotton. As sharecroppers left the field for the cities, people of all colors in Memphis started making music together. The museum took us through many dimensions of this intermingling and evolution, the role of radio and recordings, the evolution of the blues, rock and roll, and soul music, and the working together of black and white musicians, particularly in the very integrated workforce from musicians to senior management of Stax Records. They point out the black roots of Elvis Presley's music and look at both sides of a white performer taking over, but also bringing to popularity black music. Mary, what is a concluding thought you have about our trip?
Our tour was not just an itinerary of destinations, museums, landmarks, and points of interest. Rather, it was a journey that personalized events and people as we read actual names, saw photographs and sculptural depictions, heard and listened to testimonial recordings, and walked on sacred grounds. When I was a Detroit public school teacher, the month of February was dedicated to Black history. Because Detroit was a majority Black district, I understood why students needed to know their history. I knew that most suburban districts were not commemorating Black history as we were in Detroit. But what I did not realize, somewhat naively, was that Detroit's children's history was also suburban children's history because it is all American history. Taking this Black history tour of the South enabled Keith and me to continue our journey to truly understand our collective stories and interconnectedness in the greater context of a shared history and a shared humanity.
I hope that you can see why living the pledge has meant so much to many of us and how it impacts our lives today. And we want to share that story with you, and we will do so this afternoon after our service today in Hodas Hall. We're going to lift our souls now to sing with Jessica.
All right, so please rise. We're going to, in body or spirit, we're going to sing hymn number 30 in the gray hymnal. This is Over My Head. We actually sang this about a month ago. It is an African-American spiritual that historians believe was first performed around 1740, so connecting and honoring a rich history as we sing this. And it was, again, recorded and popularized during the Civil Rights Movement as well. Over my head, I am music in the air. Over my head, I am music in the air. Over my head, I am music in the air. There must be a God somewhere. Over my head, I am singing in the air. Over my head, I am singing in the air. Over my head, I am singing in the air. There must be a God somewhere. Over my head, I have trouble in the air. Over my head, I have trouble in the air. Over my head, I have trouble in the air. There must be a God somewhere. Over my head, I feel gladness in the air. Over my head, I feel gladness in the air. Over my head, I feel gladness in the air. There must be a God somewhere. Over my head, I see angels in the air. Over my head, I see angels in the air. Over my head, I see angels in the air. There must be a God somewhere.
We extinguish our chalice flame with a simple inspiration by Ralph Waldo Emerson. To laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people and the affection of children, to leave this world a bit better, to know even one life has breathed easier because you have lived. This is to have succeeded.
The Racial Justice Committee and Living the Pledge alumni invite you for conversation at our tables in Hodas Hall. Now that our worship has ended,
may our service begin.
Please stay seated for our wonderful postlude.